Perspective is not my strongest skill. More often than not, I find myself struggling with it. Even if I use perspective tools of different drawing softwares, I still have a hard time when I draw my backgrounds. Especially if I want to do something different, like a non-conventional angle. Well, good thing that with the advance of technology, new tools are being created every day to make our lives easier. And for me, 3D modeling is one of them. Now, I know this may sound counterintuitive, as most 2D artists may find the 3D realm to be overcomplicated and intimidating. But hey, that's why I'm here. I'm gonna show you how 3D modeling can be used as a powerful tool to improve your 2D background drawing. And don't worry, I'm gonna try and make this as easy and simple as possible. In this video, I'm gonna stick to the basics, and I'm gonna show you that you don't need to have an in-depth knowledge of 3D modeling to use it as a tool. After all, I'm also a beginner myself. I just recently started with experiment with 3D art. And I'm going to bring a different perspective here. As you can see, the main goal is not to create a 3D environment, but to use 3D modeling as a tool for 2D background drawing. And we're going to begin this project, as almost every single project begins, with a 2D sketch. I decided to redo this drawing from a year ago. It is a diner's kitchen with a creepy twist to it, and I think I can do a better job with this perspective. It is a more daring angle with the camera below the horizon line. Nothing too crazy, but challenging enough to make me confused. I'm gonna start opening my drawing software. You can use any of your liking. I'll be using Krita for this video. Here I imported my initial reference and I'm going to sketch on top of it to make some changes. I wanted to keep the same idea but improve it. I made a more in-depth visual research of diner kitchens so that I could make the furniture more legit. I also wanted it to feel more crowded, messier, and sloppier. It was already kinda sloppy, but not as much as I would like it to be. So I added way more objects to my scene. This part is to focus mainly on your composition. Don't be too worried about nailing your perspective here. After all, we'll be using 3D for that. It's just so that you won't have to start modeling from a void. It's nice to have a visual reference or idea of what you want your scene to look like before you start modeling it. The only thing is good to decide is whether your perspective is going to be a 1 point, a 2 point, or a 3 point, since that affects your composition directly. I decided on 2 points perspective, almost 1 point, with one of my escape points inside the freezer. On this part, you can use whatever perspective tools you're drawing software has to help you out. I've already done that for my previous drawing. That's why I'm not doing it right now, but just so you know that that's a possibility. As you can see, most of my objects are not even well defined. I just made suggestions through basic shapes. Like I wanted the left wall to be full of knives and cutlery, and I'm also like figuring out the outline shape of the dirty dishes on the sink. This is also a good time to decide the focal point of your drawing. How do you want the eyes to travel in your composition? I basically had two initial ideas. The first would be making my focal point as the freezer on the back wall. The door is slightly open and you can see a lot of meat inside of it, and that would be where I would position my main light source. But I decided to go with my second option, which was making the big knife on top of the cutting board as my focal point. You see, my freezer door was kinda centered in the drawing, and that definitely calls your attention, with the perspective lines all pointing to it. So I put a handle on one of the pans in my sink. That kind of cuts the visual flow and it directs your eyes to the knife. I also made some other changes changes, especially the foreground. I added cleaning products and a big trash can and got rid of the outline for the entrance door. And just a heads up, this is my initial sketch. It doesn't matter if it looks messy, the only thing that matters is if the composition looks nice. The details and polishing will be dealt with in the future. Now, our second reference sketch will actually be a floor plan. I'm gonna do a very simple drawing of the top view of my scene, just so that I can understand where to position all the main objects. And you see that this reference will be very important as we build our 3D scene. With my initial references ready and saved properly, I will jump into the 3D realm. Opening Blender, this window will pop up, and I'll be working under General. This is the standard Blender interface. It can take some time to get used to the 3 dimensions navigation, especially if this is your first time in a 3D software. That's why I advise you to start with a simple project. Interior, a room, furniture that can be simplified into basic shapes, not many elements in your scene. I'm gonna delete this cube right here and leave my camera and light as they are for now. Now, I normally like having 2 working areas. In one, I can keep my camera stationary so that I know how the final piece is coming together, and in the other area, I can move my view around freely so that I can place the objects on my scene without bigger restrictions. For this project though, I'll be using 3 working areas because we have a floor plan. To create these other areas, you can put your cursor on the top left and you're gonna see that this plus sign appears. Just click and drag and there you go. A new area. For the area I just created, I'm gonna click on my camera icon and set the camera perspective as the view. Now for the third area, if you come down here, you see that Blender has this window that is initially set up as an animation timeline, but we'll change that. If you click on this clock icon right here, this window will appear and I'll just select the first option, 3D viewport. Now I have my normal viewport, but seen from the top. So instead of just having one stationary view, I'll be having 2 stationary views, one from my camera view and one from the top view. And this will help me incredibly while modeling. Now I'll add my reference drawings. Shift A, image, and select reference. And I'll add my floor plan image here. Scale it and go to my scene collection and rename it. Now, for my other reference, I'm going to my camera view window and select my camera. And on the bottom right side, you can see there's a green camera icon. This is where my camera data is. Here, I can go to background images, select it, and add image. And now import my sketch. This way, I'll have my sketch reference in my camera perspective view. Going back to my floor plan reference, I'll access object data and choose the only axis align option, so that my floor plan reference will only be shown on my top view. Finally, I'm gonna hide the navigation controls on my camera view window since I won't be using them. And one more thing, selecting the camera and going to camera data, I'm gonna add some guidelines in my camera view to help me with my composition. In the viewport display, there are composition guides options. I like to use the thirds. You can pick any composition guides that you like. You can even mix and match them, selecting multiples at the same time. And you can see here that it creates these dotted thin lines in my camera view. So this is my initial setup. Everything is organized. Now I can start modeling. I will start adding my floor. Just Shift A, Mesh, plane. This is basically how you add all your 3D mesh objects. And I'm gonna fix this right here because my reference image on my camera view is behind my mesh. Going to camera data once again, background images, and choose the option front in depth, and there you go. I'm gonna select my floor and rename it under my scene collection. It is very important for you to keep track of your scene objects, renaming them accordingly, and make sure that you are on object mode. Blender has many different modes. We're gonna see edit mode later on in this video, but as of now, make sure you are working on object mode. And I'll start my blocking. I mainly use cubes and a couple of cylinders for this part, and I am also working on my top view. I feel like starting your blocking from your top view is very helpful, especially if you don't have much experience navigating on a 3D software. The 3 dimensions can be overwhelming. But from the top view, you only have to worry about the Y and the X axis. And as you can see, I am basically using my move and scale tools to roughly position my objects in the scene. For blocking, it is nice to start with big objects and simple shapes. Try to figure out their sizes and position. I am not worrying about details. That's something we're gonna figure it out later. And that's basically how you work in 3D. You start big and then you gradually go small. I'm also not minding my camera view at this point. I am just following the floor plan reference. And again, none of this is set to stone. As the project goes, you see that I'm gonna modify some stuff. Another good thing you can do is on the top window here, you can press the X on the navigation control, and that will send you to a side view of your scene, just like the top view we have. And just like that, I can adjust the height of my objects. So, with my initial blocking ready, I can position my camera. And this is when I will use our camera view as a reference. I will be using the move and rotate tools for this part, and you can also adjust your camera's focal length in your camera's data. At this point, don't be afraid to move your objects around. Nothing is set to stone. You don't have to follow your references to a T. They are just there to guide you, not restrict you. You can even end up with a different composition. You see that in 3D, you just have so many possibilities. You can move your camera around and you can come up with angles you might have not even thought about before. So yeah, don't be afraid to experiment. It is a big puzzle and it can take time. It took me a lot of time. One good thing is to keep in mind your horizon line. Following it in your 2D reference can help you a lot with the positioning of your camera. And the really interesting thing is that once you are in a 3D environment, you realize how much you cheat in 2D perspective. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's one of the charms of 2D, in my opinion. You can just get away with so many things and is to make it look good. When I got satisfied enough with my camera position, I started blocking the rest of my scene. I also took this time to organize my scene collection. I renamed everything and separated all my mesh objects in a new collection. With all my basic objects blocked in my scene and with my camera positioned, I will create my walls and ceiling. So I'm adding a cube, scaling it really big, and I will enter edit mode. On object mode, you can transform your object as a whole. On edit mode, you can edit parts of your object separately. On edit mode, I can select specific faces of my cube and delete them. And there you go, I have my walls. My scene is already looking cute, but I'll just adjust some more things here and there. You can even say that I am sketching at this point. This is just a big sketch. You know when you do a 2D sketch and you are constantly adjusting stuff, erasing stuff, moving stuff around? This is basically what I'm doing here, but with 3D. Now, if you want, you can just stop here. I finished my blocking, my camera is positioned, and my composition is on point. But in case you want to add a little bit more details to your scene just to help you out on your 2D drawing even more, you can keep modeling just a tiny bit. Again, this part really depends on how much work you want to put into your 3D reference. And since our main goal here is not to model a 3D scene, but to make a 2D drawing, you don't have to add all the details for each object. You can just add the most important ones. And really, just follow your heart. Do what you think will help you. For example, I'm gonna add the cutouts for my window and the freezer on my walls. I'll also be polishing the objects on my scene a little bit more, like adding legs on my tables and creating small cylinders for items on the counter. For this part, I'm using mainly edit mode, a lot of the extrude tool, and also modifiers like array, mirror, and solidify. Nothing really fancy. Again, this is basic modeling, beginner level. All of this I've learned following simple tutorials online. One good source is Blender Vitals. They do really great, short, straight to the point videos, and you can find them on both YouTube and Instagram. And just like that, little by little, I'm building up my scene. There are just so many tools and so many ways to model an object. But the thing is, the more different objects you model, the more different tools you learn. So if you really want to learn 3D modeling, I advise you to go a little further than just basic blocking shapes. You can also skip this part and go straight to rendering if you already feel comfortable enough doing your lighting on 2D. Really, take as much as you want from this video. You don't have to follow every single step. But since I already have a 3D model, might as well light it up. For this part, I'm going to hide the reference on my camera view completely, and I'll also delete the standard light object that comes with every Blender scene. I'll then add a spotlight to be the light coming from outside my window. But before I place my light, I'll go to my camera view window, hide the controls, and select this final circle in the viewport shading. This option gives me a real-time render preview of my scene. This way, I can have a better idea of how my lighting will turn out without having to fully render it. And as you can see here, my scene is in complete darkness. After all, I just deleted the only light source I had, so I need to rebuild all my lighting from scratch. And this part also consists of various experimentations. You can play around with your light sources depending on what type of lighting you want for your scene. Blender offers you 4 types of light objects: point, sun, spot, and area. Each one of them emits light in a different way. I like using the spotlight to better control the area affected by my light, but I will also be using the area and point type throughout my scene. Right now, I decided to make my main light source coming from outside the window. Lighten up the big knife on top of my cutting table. The issue is that just this light is not enough. My scene is still 90% in the dark. You can barely see the objects in it. That's because in 3D, you need to add way more lights than just your light source. And this is where knowledge of how lighting actually works come into place. For example, there's something called bounce light. Bounce light is, to put it simply, when a surface reflects the light it receives, and it is a technique used to light up environments in art. In my scene, the light touches the floor, and I'm gonna add a bounce light to this area. So I create an area type light, and I'll position it on the floor. You can see this area being lightened up. I just need to keep the intensity of this new light lower than the one of my main spotlight. So I kept testing my lights, changing their positions, their intensities, adding more lights, like a faint one coming from the freezer's door so that the back back part of my scene can be lightened up a little bit. It is really a trial and error process. And again, this will be just a reference for me, so I'm not bothered on making it look perfect. I also wanted to try a second lighting approach, so I created 2 new scene collections, each one for a different lighting. The second time, I wanted my main light source to come from my freezer. I angled it so that it could frame the big knife on top of the table. After all, lighting is also storytelling. It takes a huge part in composition. The lighting of your scene can change the mood of it drastically. And just like perspective lines can draw your attention, the lines created by lighting do the same trick. For example, even though the light is coming from my freezer, the knife still calls your attention because of the lines that my lighting created on the floor and on the other objects, all pointing to the knife. Its contrast is also very nice. You can see that the knife is perfectly silhouetted. Now, if you are a chaotic person, you can just screenshot this and call it a day. That's what I normally do. But for the sake of this video, I'm gonna show you the more appropriate method. Once you are fully satisfied with your scene, you can render it. Clicking here on this camera icon, you have the render properties, and I will be using Eevee as the render engine for this project. Now, going to this printer icon is the output details, where I can choose the folder where I will save my render and the file format. I picked a PNG because I am rendering an image, not a video. Now, since I have 2 light collections, I need to disable the rendering in one of them. Here, you can see that I have the viewport disabled, but I also need to click on this camera and disable the render. That way, the software will not render anything that is inside this specific collection. Otherwise, both of my lights will be rendered together, and I don't want that. So with that, I can come to the top here to render and select render image. You can also press F12. And here is my rendered scene. Now I will go to image, save as, and save this image in my computer. And I will do the same process with the other lighting set. Here I have my 2 references with both perspective and lighting ready. And now I can just draw. Going back to my drawing software of choice, I already imported my references and I also added some perspective guidelines to further help me. And this part is very simple. I'm gonna trace the 3D mesh. Very straightforward. After all, the perspective is already here. After tracing the blocking of my scene, I imported my 2D reference and I will start adding the rest of the elements. This is when the perspective guidelines help me up. I'm sketching all the smaller items, filling up my scene, making it look crowded. One thing I like to do is giving my foreground more details, while the objects further back are looser, sketchier, even messier. This gives a nice depth to my drawing. So my final result looks like this. I also added values to my drawing using the lighting on my 3D blocking as reference, and you can clearly see the improvement, especially when compared side by side. The initial drawing I did using just perspective tools on a 2D software versus the one where I used 3D modeling. And I can go further on this piece. I can add color and clean my line work, but for the sake of this video, I'll stop right here. I hope this video have helped you some way. I just wanted to share with you guys a possible tool that I've recently incorporated in my process, and that is helping me a lot. I know sometimes we tend to put 2D and 3D on separate boxes and avoid mixing them up, for whatever prejudices we might have. But I do think every medium of art is valid and we can only gain with their overlap. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments and see you next time.